I hadn't spoken to my father in 6 years. So why, at 2 a.m., did I wake up hearing him say my name? I sat up in bed, heart pounding, certain someone had called out to me. The apartment was empty. It always was. But the voice, his voice, low and tired the way I remembered it, stayed in my ears like it had just happened. I told myself it was nothing. A dream fragment. The kind of thing that dissolves the moment you turn on a light. I turned on the light anyway. My name is Rachel, and at the time, I was 31, living alone in a small apartment outside Denver, working as a claims adjuster for an insurance company. It was the kind of job that filled the hours without filling anything else. I liked routine. Routine felt safe. Wake up, coffee, work, gym, dinner, sleep. I had built a life that required very little from me emotionally, and I preferred it that way. I hadn't planned it that way, not consciously. But looking back, I think I built my whole adult life around not feeling certain things too deeply. My father leaving when I was 25 had done that. He didn't die. He didn't disappear dramatically. He just called one day and said he needed space, and then the calls got shorter, and then they stopped. No explanation I ever fully accepted. Just silence dressed up as distance. So I stopped waiting for him to explain. I told people I was fine with it. I told myself the same thing so often it started to sound true. The voice came back 3 nights later. Same thing, just my name, said quietly, the way he used to say it when he'd stand in my bedroom doorway to check if I was asleep. I remember thinking, this is strange, but not scary strange. More like my mind was trying to hand me something I kept refusing to open. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I even tell? My mother and I didn't talk about him. My friends knew the surface version of the story. Dad left, we don't talk, moving on, and that version worked fine for casual conversation. It didn't leave room for 2 a.m. voices. A week later, I was going through old boxes in my closet, looking for a document for my taxes, when I found a small stack of birthday cards. All from him. All from after he left. I hadn't opened most of them. I remembered being angry enough, back then, to just toss them in a box without reading them, a kind of quiet punishment, though I never admitted that's what it was. I sat on my bedroom floor and opened the first one. Then the second. Then all of them, one after another, the paper going soft in my hands. They weren't dramatic. He didn't apologize in some sweeping way that would have made a better story. Mostly he wrote small things, how proud he was of something I'd posted online, a memory from when I was a kid, a joke that wasn't very funny. But in nearly every card, there was one line that repeated in different forms, I hope you know none of this was about you. I remember sitting there thinking, why does that matter now? He's not here to see me reading them. This changes nothing. But it did change something. Not the facts. The facts stayed the same, he left, he was distant, years passed. What changed was smaller and stranger. I started to notice that the version of him I'd been carrying around wasn't really him. It was a character I'd built to make sense of the pain. Cold. Selfish. Absent by choice, like it was easy for him. I decided to call him. I didn't decide it in some big emotional moment. I decided it the way you decide to finally return a phone call you've been avoiding, quietly, almost businesslike, like I was just closing an open loop. He picked up on the 3rd ring. His voice sounded exactly like it did in my head at 2 a.m., which unsettled me more than I expected. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. Awkward at first, both of us circling the real conversation without landing on it. Then I asked him, almost without meaning to, why he really left. He got quiet for a second. Then he told me things I didn't know, that he'd been struggling with depression for years before he left, that he'd convinced himself he was doing me a favor by staying distant instead of being present, and inconsistent, unreliable, someone I'd have to manage instead of rely on. He said he thought space was a kindness. He said he was wrong, but by the time he understood that, too much time had passed and he didn't know how to come back without it looking like an excuse. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor, phone pressed to my ear, thinking, this doesn't undo anything. And it didn't. But it did something else. It replaced the story I'd been telling myself with something more human, more complicated, less like a wound I could point to and more like two people who had both made assumptions about what the other one needed. I hadn't asked him a real question in 6 years. I had just built a version of him that was easier to be angry at than the actual, flawed, struggling person on the other end of the phone. After that call, I noticed something in myself I hadn't expected. A kind of tiredness, but not the bad kind, the kind you feel after finally putting down something heavy you'd been carrying so long you forgot it had weight. I didn't forgive him instantly. That's not how it works, no matter what people say in movies. But I stopped needing him to be the villain in my story. And strangely, that made me feel more in control of my own life, not less. The voice never came back after that. Not once. I used to think that was a coincidence, but now I don't think it was. I think some part of me had been trying to get my attention for a long time, and I'd been too busy managing the version of the story that hurt less to actually listen. What I understood, eventually, is that we don't usually hold on to anger because the person hurt us so badly we can't let go. We hold on to it because it's simpler than the alternative. Anger has clean edges. Understanding doesn't. Understanding forces you to hold two things at once, that someone hurt you, and that they were also a person doing the best they could with what they had, which sometimes wasn't much. I think about how many relationships in my life I'd simplified the same way. Coworkers I'd written off after one bad interaction. Friends I'd quietly distanced myself from because it was easier than asking what was actually going on with them. I'd been doing this for years without noticing, protecting myself by flattening people into characters I could predict, instead of staying curious about who they actually were. My father and I aren't close now. We're not going to be the kind of family that makes up for lost time in some tidy way. But we talk sometimes. Real conversations, not performances. And I no longer flinch when I think about those 6 years. I just think, that's when I was still deciding what kind of story I wanted to tell myself about him. Sometimes I wonder how many people are out there right now, replaying the same story about someone, a parent, a friend, an old version of a relationship, without ever checking if the story is even true anymore. I know I'm not the only one who's done that. I don't think anyone gets through life without building at least one version of a person that's easier to live with than the real thing. What I keep coming back to isn't really about my father. It's about how much of what we carry, the resentment, the certainty, the distance, is built on a story we never went back to check. We assume we already know why someone did what they did. We assume the silence means what we think it means. And I wonder what would happen if more of us went back and reopened those old cards, so to speak. Not to excuse anyone. Just to see what's actually written there, instead of what we've been imagining all along.